used only after the Chancellor has addressed this House is rather different to what we have apparently experienced this year. That is the briefing to the media of details of the budget statement to be published before the statement is delivered. As Mr. Speaker has said, and all ministers know, important policy announcements should be made first to Parliament. Given there shouldn't be shouts of resign over there, that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about courtesy to this House. Given my responsibilities to the House with regard to the budget, I must put on record my support for Mr. Speaker's stance on this issue and express a firm hope, which I believe is felt on all sides of the House, that we do not find ourselves in this position again at future budgets. But, Chancellor, we are all very much looking forward to hearing the remainder of your announcements, which you're about to make to us. I would like to know... Oh, no, you haven't. The Chancellor has still to give us the important parts of his budget. I remind honourable members that copies of the budget resolutions will be available from the Vote Office and Members' Lobby after the Chancellor's statement and, of course, online. I also remind honourable members we will have good behaviour over this next hour or so. Interventions are not taken during the Chancellor's statement, nor indeed during the reply.
Well, Eleanor Lang, who is from the Conservative side, backing up Lindsay Hoyle, who, of course, is Labour, attacking the Chancellor for the way in which the contents of the budget have been leaked in advance. Now, we will get the Chancellor's budget statement. Rishi Sunak at the dispatch box.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've heard your words and those of Mr. Speaker. I have the greatest respect for you both, and I want to assure you that I have listened very carefully to what you have said. And may I also, Madam Deputy Speaker, send my best wishes to the Leader of the Opposition, and I know the whole House will join me in doing that. And now, with your permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me turn to today's budget. Madam Deputy Speaker, employment is up. Investment is growing. Public services are improving. The public finances are stabilising. And wages are rising. Today's budget delivers a stronger economy for the British people. Stronger growth, with the UK recovering faster than our major competitors. Stronger public finances, with our debt under control. Stronger employment, with fewer people out of work and more people in work. Growth up, jobs up and debt down. Let there be no doubt our plan is working. Madam Deputy Speaker, this budget is about what this government is about. Investment in a more innovative, high-skilled economy, because that is the only sustainable path to individual prosperity. World-class public services, because these are the common goods from which we all benefit. Backing business, because our future cannot be built by government alone, but must come from the imagination and drive of our entrepreneurs. Help for working families with the cost of living, because we will always give people the support they need and the tools to build a better life for themselves. And levelling up, because for too long, far too long, the location of your birth has determined too much of your future, because the awesome power of opportunity shouldn't be available only to a wealthy few, but be the birthright of every child in an independent and prosperous United Kingdom. Madam Deputy Speaker, today's budget does not draw a line under COVID. We have challenging months ahead. And let me encourage everyone eligible to get their booster jabs as soon as possible. But today's budget does begin the work of preparing for a new economy post-COVID. The Prime Minister's economy of higher wages, higher skills and rising productivity. of strong public services, vibrant communities and safer streets, an economy fit for a new age of optimism, where the only limit to our potential is the effort we are prepared to put in and the sacrifices we are prepared to make. That is the stronger economy of the future, and this budget is the foundation. Madam Deputy Speaker, the House will recognise the challenging backdrop of rising inflation. Let me begin by carefully explaining what is happening in our economy and why. Inflation in September was 3.1% and is likely to rise further, with the OBR expecting CPI to average 4% over the next year. The majority of this rise in inflation can be explained by two global forces. First, as economies around the world reopen, demand for goods has increased more quickly than supply chains can meet. Having been shut down for almost a year, it takes time for factories to scale up production, for container ships to move goods to where demand is, for businesses to hire the people they need. And second, global demand for energy has surged at a time when supplies have already been disrupted, putting a strain on prices. In the year to September, the global wholesale price of oil, coal and gas combined has more than doubled. The pressures caused by supply chains and energy prices will take months to ease. It would be irresponsible for anyone to pretend that we can solve this overnight. I am in regular communication with finance ministers around the world, and it's clear these are shared global problems, neither unique to the UK nor possible for us to address on our own. But where the government can ease these pressures, we will act. To address the driver shortage, the Transport Secretary is introducing temporary visas, tackling testing backlogs, changing cabotage requirements, and is today announcing new funding to improve lorry park facilities. We've already suspended the HGV levy until August, and I can do more today, extending it for a further year until 2023 and freezing vehicle excise duty for heavy goods vehicles. To help with the cost of living, we've introduced a new £500 million household support fund, and today's budget will support working families further. And in terms of our fiscal policy, we are going to meet our commitments on public services and capital investment, but we are going to do so keeping in mind the need to control inflation. And finally, I have written to the Governor of the Bank of England today to reaffirm their remit to achieve low and stable inflation. And people should be reassured they have a strong track record in doing so. I understand people are concerned about global inflation, but they have a government here at home ready and willing to act. And Madam Deputy Speaker, in a period of global uncertainty, you need to work hard to maintain a strong economy and be responsible with the public finances, and that is what we are doing. I'm grateful to the OBR for their work, and I'm pleased to say they now expect our recovery to be quicker. Thanks to this government's actions, they forecast the economy to return to its pre-COVID level at the turn of the year, earlier than they thought in March. Growth this year is revised up from 4 to 6.5%. The OBR then expect the economy to grow by 6% in 2022 and 2.1%, 1.3% and 1.6% over the next 3 years. In July last year, at the height of the pandemic, unemployment was expected to peak at 12%. Today, the OBR expect unemployment to peak at just 5.2%. That means over 2 million fewer people out of work than previously feared. And wages are rising. Compared to February 2020, they have grown in real terms by almost 3.5%. And I can confirm for the House the OBR's forecast for business investment has been revised up over the next 5 years. And because of the actions we took to support our economy, we have been more successful than previously feared in preventing the long-term economic damage of COVID. The OBR have today revised down their scarring assumption from 3% to 2%. In the depths of the worst economic crisis on record, we set out a plan for jobs, a plan that was backed by business groups and trade bodies, a plan that has helped millions of people and saved millions of jobs, a plan that the OBR have today described as remarkably successful. Madam Deputy Speaker, today's forecasts confirm beyond doubt our plan for jobs is working. And Madam Deputy Speaker, disruption in the global economy highlights the importance of strong public finances. Coronavirus left us with borrowing higher than at any time since the Second World War. As the Prime Minister reminded us in his conference speech, higher borrowing today is just higher interest rates and even higher taxes tomorrow. So we need to strengthen our public finances so that when the next crisis comes, we have the fiscal space to act. Today, I am publishing a new Charter for Budget Responsibility. The Charter sets out 2 fiscal rules which will keep this government on the path of discipline and responsibility. First, underlying public sector net debt, excluding the impact of the Bank of England, must, as a percentage of GDP, be falling. Second, in normal times, the state should only borrow to invest in our future growth and prosperity. Everyday spending must be paid through taxation. Both rules must be met by the 3rd year of every forecast period, giving us the flexibility to respond to crises while credibly keeping our public finances under control. These rules are supplemented by targets to spend up to 3% of GDP on capital investment and keep welfare spending on a sustainable path. Madam Deputy Speaker, the House will be asked to vote on our Charter, giving members a simple choice: to abandon our fiscal anchor and leave our economy adrift with reckless, unfunded pledges, or to vote for what we on this side of the House know is the right course: sound public finances and a stronger economy for the British people. Madam Deputy Speaker, important as the Charter is, our credibility comes as much from what we do as what we say. So I'm pleased to tell the House that because our plan is delivering a stronger economy, and because we've taken tough but responsible decisions on public finances, the OBR report today that all our fiscal rules have been met. Underlying debt is forecast to be 85.2% of GDP this year, then 85.4% of GDP in 22-23, before peaking at 85.7% in 23-24. It then falls in the final 3 years of the forecast from 85.1 to 83.3%. Borrowing as a percentage of GDP is forecast to fall in every single year, from 7.9% this year to 3.3% next, then 2.4, 1.7, 1.7 and 1.5% in the following years. Borrowing down, debt down, proving once again it is the Conservatives and only the Conservatives who can be trusted with taxpayers' money. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have made 4 fiscal judgments in this budget. First, we will meet our fiscal rules with a margin to protect ourselves against economic risks. That is the responsible decision at a time of increasing global economic uncertainty, when our public finances are twice as sensitive to changes in interest rates as they were before the pandemic, and 6 times as sensitive as they were before the financial crisis. Just a 1 percentage point in inflation and interest rates would cost us around £23 billion. My second judgment today is to continue supporting working families. Third, as well as helping people at home, our improving fiscal situation means we will meet our obligations to the world's poorest. I told the House that we met our fiscal tests, we would return to spending 0.7% of our national income on overseas aid. Some people said this was a trick or a device. I told this House it was no such thing. And based on the tests I set out, today's forecasts show that we are, in fact, scheduled to return to 0.7 in 24-25 before the end of this Parliament. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, my fourth fiscal judgment is this. Today's budget increases total departmental spending over this Parliament by £150 billion. That's the largest increase this century, with spending growing by 3.8% a year in real terms. As a result of this spending review, and contrary to speculation, there will be a real terms rise in overall spending for every single department. And public sector net investment as a share of GDP will be at the highest sustained level for nearly half a century. If anybody still doubts it, today's budget confirms the Conservatives are the real party of public services. Madam Deputy Speaker, our stronger economy lays the foundation for everything we want to achieve in today's budget. World-class public services and more investment in our future growth. Before I turn to the details, I'd like to thank my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary. Yeah. Completing the spending review in such challenging circumstances was a tall order, and thankfully we had just the man for the job. Madam Deputy Speaker, at the start of this Parliament, resource spending on healthcare was £133 billion. Today's spending review confirms that by the end of this Parliament, it will increase by £44 billion to over £177 billion. And the extra revenue we're forecast to raise from the health and social care levy is going direct to the NHS and social care as promised. The health capital budget will be the largest since 2010. Record investment in health R&D, including better newborn screening, as campaigned for by the member for the cities of London and Westminster. 40 new hospitals, 70 hospital upgrades, more operating theatres to tackle the backlog, and 100 community diagnostic centres. All staffed by a bigger, better-trained workforce with 50,000 more nurses and 50 million more primary care appointments. As well as funding to deliver the Prime Minister's historic reforms to social care, we're providing local government with new grant funding over the next 3 years of £4.8 billion, the largest increase in core funding for over a decade. And we're investing more in housing and home ownership too, with a multi-year housing settlement totalling nearly £24 billion. £11.5 billion to build up to the 180,000 new affordable homes, the largest cash investment in a decade, 20% larger than the previous programme. And we're investing an extra £1.8 billion, enough to bring 1,500 hectares of brownfield land into use, meet our commitment to invest £10 billion in new housing, and unlock 1 million new homes. We're also confirming £5 billion to remove unsafe cladding from the highest risk buildings, partly funded by the Residential Property Developers Tax, which I can confirm will be levied on developers with profits over £25 million at a rate of 4%. And we've also reduced rough sleeping by over a third, but we will go further, with £640 million a year for rough sleeping and homelessness, an 85% increase in funding compared to 2019. Madam Deputy Speaker, Today's budget funds our ambition to recruit 20,000 new police officers, provides an extra £2.2 billion for courts, prisons and probation services, including £500 million to reduce the courts' backlog, pays for programmes to tackle neighbourhood crime, reoffending, county lines, violence against women and girls, victim services and improved responses to rape cases. And over the next 3 years, commits £3.8 billion to the largest prison building programme in a generation. Madam Deputy Speaker, all governments should aspire to provide greater life chances for future generations, but few governments can match our ambition. So let me now turn to what this budget does to support children. The evidence is compelling that the first 1,001 days of a child's life are the most important. My right honourable friend, the member for South Northamptonshire, has recognised this with her inspirational report. And we are responding today with £300 million for a Start for Life offer for families, high-quality parenting programmes, tailored services to help with perinatal mental health. And I'm pleased to tell the member for Congleton funding to create a network of family hubs around the country too, to improve the quality of childcare. We're going to pay providers more, with today's spending review providing an extra £170 million by 24-25. We're confirming £150 million to support training and development for the entire early years workforce, to help up to 300,000 more families facing multiple needs. We're investing an extra £200 million in the Supporting Families programme, and we will provide over £200 million a year to continue the Holiday Activity and Food programme. Today's spending review also delivers our commitment to schools, with an extra £4.7 billion by 24-25, which, combined with the ambitious plans we announced at the spending review of 2019, will restore per-pupil funding to 2010 levels in real terms, equivalent to a cash increase for every pupil of more than £1,500. And for children with special educational needs and disabilities, we are more than tripling the amount we invest to create 30,000 new school places. And we know that the pandemic caused significant disruption to children's learning. We've already announced £3.1 billion to help education recovery. Today, as promised by the Prime Minister and the Education Secretary, we will go further with just under £2 billion of new funding to help schools and colleges, bringing this government's total support for education recovery to almost £5 billion. Madam Deputy Speaker, as we level up public services, we are also levelling up communities, restoring the pride people feel in the places they call home. To do that, we're providing £560 million for youth services, enough to fund up to 300 youth clubs across the country, over £200 million to build or transform 8,000 state-of-the-art community football pitches across the UK, funding to turn over 100 areas of derelict land into new pocket parks, and I'm allocating the first round of bids from the Levelling Up Fund. £1.7 billion to invest in the infrastructure of everyday life in over 100 local areas, with £170 million in Scotland, £120 million in Wales and £50 million in Northern Ireland, more than their Barnet shares. This will benefit the whole United Kingdom. We are backing projects in Aberdeen, Bury, Burnley, Lewes, Clwyd South, and not one, not two, but 3 successful projects for the great city of Stoke-on-Trent. But that's not all. We're also going to fund projects in Ashton-under-Lyne, South Leicester, Sunderland, Doncaster, and West Leeds. Madam Deputy Speaker, We are so committed to levelling up, we are even levelling up the opposition front bench. Madam Deputy Speaker, levelling up is also about protecting our unique culture and heritage. The British Museum, Tate Liverpool, the York Railway Museum, we're investing £800 million to protect museums, galleries, libraries and local culture. And thanks to the Culture Secretary, over 100 regional museums and libraries will be renovated, restored and revived. And she secured up to £2 million to start work on a new Beatles attraction on the Liverpool waterfront. We're also going to review our museum freedoms and make our creative tax reliefs more generous. On current plans, the tax relief for museums and galleries is due to end in March next year, just as exhibitions are starting to tour again. So I've decided to extend it for 2 years to March 2024. And to support theatres, orchestras, museums and galleries to recover from COVID, the tax reliefs for all those sectors from today until April 2023 will be doubled, and they won't return to the normal rate until April 2024. That's a tax relief for culture worth almost £250 million. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a budget for the whole United Kingdom. Through the Barnett formula, today's decisions increase Scottish Government funding in each year by an average of £4.6 billion. Welsh Government funding by £2.5 billion and £1.6 billion for the Northern Ireland Executive. This delivers, in real terms, the largest block grants for the devolved administration since the devolution settlements of 1998. The whole of the United Kingdom will benefit from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and over time we will ramp up funding so that total domestic UK-wide funding will match EU receipts, averaging around £1.5 billion a year. And we will fund projects across the UK, including funding for the Extreme E race in Scotland, the 22 Hebrides X-Prix, accelerating funding for the Cardiff City Region deal in Wales, and funding in Northern Ireland for community cohesion. And whilst today demonstrates the indisputable fiscal benefit of being part of the United Kingdom, this is and always will be secondary to the simple truth that we are bound together by more than transactional benefit. It is our collective history, our culture and our security. We are and always will be one family, one United Kingdom. Madam Deputy Speaker, whilst today's budget delivers historically high levels of public spending, its success will be measured not by the billions we spend, but by the outcomes we achieve and the difference we make to people's lives. The budgets are set, the plans are in place, the task is clear. Now we must deliver, because this isn't the government's money, it's taxpayers' money. Madam Deputy Speaker, our stronger economy allows us to fund world-class public services, the people's priority. But over the long term, the only way to pay for higher spending is economic growth. And if we want to see higher growth, we've got to tackle the problem that's been holding back this country for far too long: our uneven economic geography. As we come out of the worst economic shock we've ever seen, we've got a choice: to retrench or to invest. This government chooses to invest. To invest in our economic infrastructure, to invest in innovation, to invest in skills, to invest in a plan for growth that builds a stronger economy for the future. That's what this budget is about, and that's what this government is about. Madam Deputy Speaker, infrastructure connects our country, drives productivity and levels up. That's why our national infrastructure strategy invests in economic infrastructure like roads, railways, broadband and mobile, over £130 billion. To connect our towns and cities, we're investing £21 billion on roads and £46 billion on railways. Our integrated rail plan will be published soon, dramatically improving journey times between our towns and cities. And today, we're providing £5.7 billion for London-style transport settlements in Greater Manchester, the Liverpool City region, the Tees Valley, South Yorkshire, West Midlands and the West of England. And we're helping local transport everywhere, with £2.6 billion for a long-term pipeline of over 50 local roads upgrades, over £5 billion for local roads maintenance, enough to fill 1 million more potholes a year, and funding for buses, cycling and walking, totalling more than £5 billion. The Prime Minister promised an infrastructure revolution. This budget delivers an infrastructure revolution. Madam Deputy Speaker, investment in our infrastructure is just the first step. We need to do what the people of this country have always done: invent, discover and create the ideas and technologies that will change the world. So we will also invest more in innovation. The UK is already a world leader. With less than 1% of the world's population, we have 4 of the world's top 20 universities, 14% of the world's most impactful research, and the second most Nobel laureates. We want to go further. I can confirm we will maintain our target to increase R&D investment to £22 billion. But in order to get there and deliver on our other priorities, we'll reach the target in 26-27, spending by the end of this Parliament £20 billion a year on R&D. That's a cash increase of 50%, the fastest increase ever. And I can confirm for the House that this £20 billion is in addition to the cost of our R&D tax reliefs. Combined with those tax reliefs, total public investment in R&D is increasing from 0.7% of GDP in 2018 to 1.1% of GDP by the end of the Parliament. How does 1.1% compare internationally? Well, the latest available data shows an OECD average of just 0.7%. Germany investing 0.9%, France 1%, and the United States just 0.7%. This unprecedented funding will increase core science funding to £5.9 billion per year by 24-25, a cash increase of 37%. Meet the full cost of associating with Horizon Europe. Establish the new Advanced Research and Invention Agency with £800 million by 25-26, and strengthen our focus on late-stage innovation, increasing Innovate UK's annual core budget to £1 billion, double what it was at the start of this Parliament. Madam Deputy Speaker, there's more to becoming a science superpower than just what the government spends on R&D. Our ambitious net zero strategy is also an innovation strategy, investing £30 billion to create the new green industries of the future. We've just issued our second green bond, making us the 3rd largest issuer of sovereign green bonds anywhere in the world. London last week was named the best place in the world for green finance, and on Monday, the new UK Infrastructure Bank announced its first ever investment, £107 million to support offshore wind in Teesside. And to build on this work, 1 week today, I'll be hosting global finance ministers and businesses at COP26. And Madam Deputy Speaker, innovation comes from the imagination, drive and risk-taking of business. That's why we've launched Help to Grow for turbocharged SME productivity, started a new co-investment venture capital fund, Future Fund Breakthrough. It's why I'm announcing today we will consult on further changes to the regulatory charge cap for pension schemes, unlocking institutional investment whilst protecting savers. It's why we're introducing a new £1.4 billion Global Britain Investment Fund, supporting transformative economic activity and our world-leading sectors like life sciences, And it's why today's budget increases the British Business Bank's regional financing programmes to £1.6 billion, expanding their coverage and helping innovative businesses get access to the finance they need across the whole United Kingdom. Madam Deputy Speaker, a third of our Science Nobel laureates have been immigrants. Half of our fastest-growing companies have a foreign-born founder. So an economy built on innovation must be open and attractive to the best and brightest minds. Thanks to our brilliant Home Secretary, today's budget confirms the eligibility criteria for our new scale-up visa, making it quicker and easier for the fast-growing businesses to bring in highly skilled individuals. And the Trade Secretary's new Global Talent Network, launching initially in the Bay Area, Boston and Bangalore, will identify, attract and relocate the best global talent in science and tech sectors, all part of our plan to make our visa system for international talent the most competitive in the world. Madam Deputy Speaker, if we want greater private sector innovation, we need to make our research and development tax reliefs fit for purpose. The latest figures show the UK has the second highest spending on R&D tax reliefs in the OECD, yet it's not working as well as it should. UK business investment in R&D is less than half the OECD average. We've reviewed the reliefs and identified two issues we are solving today. First, the reliefs need to reflect how businesses conduct research in the modern world. So, as many companies have called for, I'm expanding the scope of the reliefs to include cloud computing and data costs. The second problem is this. Companies claimed UK tax relief on £48 billion of R&D spending. Yet UK business investment was around half of that, at just £26 billion. We are subsidising billions of pounds of R&D that isn't even happening here in the United Kingdom. That's unfair on British taxpayers, and it puts us out of step with places like Australia, Canada, Hong Kong, Singapore, Switzerland and the USA, who have all focused their R&D tax reliefs on domestic activity. So from April 2023, we are going to do the same and incentivise greater investment here at home. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, £22 billion investment in R&D, the Net Zero Strategy, the Future Fund, Help to Grow, more regional finance, unlocking institutional capital, a more competitive visa system and a modernised R&D tax credits regime. Enough action to prove the hypothesis we are making this country a science and technology superpower. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, as well as investing in infrastructure and innovation, there is one further part of our plan for growth that is crucial: providing a world-class education to all our people. Higher skills lead to higher regional productivity, and higher productivity leads to higher wages. With 80% of the UK's 2030 workforce already in work, our future success depends not just on the schooling we give our children, but the lifelong learning we offer to adults. We've already done a lot. Our plan for jobs invested in apprenticeships, traineeships and the Kickstart scheme, but we need to go further. Today's budget invests in the most wide-ranging skills agenda this country has seen in decades. We are increasing skills spending over the Parliament by £3.8 billion, an increase of 42%. We're expanding T-levels, building institutes of technology, rolling out the Prime Minister's Lifetime Skills Guarantee, upgrading our FE College estate, quadrupling the number of places on skills boot camps, and significantly increasing funding for apprenticeships. We are also going to tackle a tragic fact. Millions of adults in our country have numeracy skills lower than those expected of a 9-year-old. According to the leading charity, National Numeracy, this costs individuals with poor numeracy up to £1,600 a year in lost earnings. People with poor numeracy skills are more than twice as likely to be unemployed as their peers. So today, I can announce a new UK-wide numeracy programme, Multiply. With £560 million, Multiply will improve basic math skills and help to change people's lives across the whole United Kingdom. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're building our infrastructure with new roads, railways and broadband, cementing our status as a science and technology superpower, and strengthening the skills of our people, the country's greatest asset. That is a real plan for growth, and that's how this government is building a stronger economy for the British people. Madam Deputy Speaker, world-class public services are the people's priority. Investment in infrastructure, innovation and skills will create the growth that we need to pay for them. But as Conservatives, we know that government action alone won't be enough to create a stronger economy. We want this country to be the most exciting and dynamic place in the world for business. And now that we've left the EU, we have the freedom to do things differently and deliver a simpler, fairer tax system. I want to begin with one of our smallest taxes, but a tax which plays an important role in one of our preeminent industries, shipping. Now that we've left the EU, today we start reforming our tonnage tax regime to make it simpler and more competitive. And we're also making it fairer for UK taxpayers. When we were in the old EU system, ships in the tonnage tax regime were required to fly the flag of an EU state. But that doesn't make sense for an independent nation, so I can announce today that our tonnage tax will, for the first time ever, reward companies for adopting the UK merchant shipping flag, the red ensign. That is entirely fitting for a country with such a proud maritime history as ours. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am sure the opposition will be delighted that red flags are still flying somewhere in this country, even if they are all at sea. Let me turn now to air passenger duty. Right now, people pay more for return flights with and between the four nations of the United Kingdom than they do when flying home from abroad. We used to have a return leg exemption for domestic flights, but were required to remove it in 2001. But today, I can announce that flights between airports in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland will, from April 2023, be subject to a new, lower rate of air passenger duty. This will help cut the cost of living, with 9 million passengers seeing their duty cut by half. It will bring people together across the United Kingdom. And because they tend to have a greater proportion of domestic passengers, it is a boost to regional airports like Aberdeen, Belfast, Inverness and Southampton. Airports are major regional employers. So to help them get through the winter, I'm also extending our support for English airports for a further 6 months. We're also making changes to reduce carbon emissions from aviation. Most emissions come from international rather than domestic aviation. So we are introducing from April 2023 a new ultra-long-haul band in air passenger duty covering flights of over 5,500 miles with an economy rate of £91. Less than 5% of passengers will pay more, but those who fly furthest will pay the most. Madam Deputy Speaker, our approach to corporate taxation strikes a responsible balance between funding public services and encouraging the investment we need for a stronger economy. At the March budget, we took the difficult but necessary decision to increase the rate of corporation tax to 25% from 2023. Still, the lowest rate in the G7 and the 5th lowest rate in the G20. Alongside, I introduced the new super deduction, the biggest business tax cut in modern British history, and extended to the end of this year the annual investment allowance at its higher level of £1 million. Now is not the time to remove tax breaks on investment, so I can confirm today that the £1 million annual investment allowance will not end in December as planned. It will be extended all the way to March 2023. I also said in March that I would review the bank surcharge within corporation tax to maintain the competitiveness of our financial services industry. We will retain a surcharge of 3%. The overall rate for corporation tax on banks will, in 2023, increase from 27% to 28% and will remain higher than the rate paid by other companies. Small challenger banks are improving banking competition, which is good for the sector and good for consumers. So to help them, I will also raise the annual allowance to £100 million. Madam Deputy Speaker, our manifesto promised to review business rates. We're publishing our conclusions today. But before I set out our plans, let me say this. We on this side of the House are clear that reckless, unfunded promises to abolish a tax which raises £25 billion every year are completely irresponsible. It would be wrong to find £25 billion a year in extra borrowing, cuts to public services or tax rises elsewhere. So we will retain business rates, but with key reforms to ease the burden and create stronger high streets. First, we will make the business rate system fairer and timelier, with more frequent revaluations every 3 years. The new revaluation cycle will be delivered from 2023. Second, as called for by the Federation of Small Business and the British Property Federation, we're introducing a new investment relief to encourage businesses to adopt green technologies like solar panels. And I'm announcing today that we'll accept the CBI and the British Retail Consortium's recommendation to introduce a new business rates improvement relief. From 2023, every single business will be able to make property improvements and for 12 months pay no extra business rates. That means a hotel adding extra rooms, a manufacturer expanding their factory, an office adding new air conditioning, CCTV or bike shelters will all pay no extra rates. Together with the new green investment relief, we're introducing investment incentives totalling £750 million. This will make a difference, but without action, millions of businesses would see their tax bills going up next year because of inflation. I want to help those businesses right now. So our third step is that next year's planned increase in the multiplier will be cancelled. That's a tax cut for businesses worth over the next 5 years £4.6 billion. And I have one final measure to help those businesses hardest hit by the pandemic. I'm announcing today, for 1 year, a new 50% business rates discount for businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors. Pubs, music venues, cinemas, restaurants, hotels, theatres and gyms. Any eligible business can claim a discount on their bills of 50% up to a maximum of £110,000. That is a business tax cut worth almost £1.7 billion. Together with small business rate relief, this means that over 90% of all retail, hospitality and leisure businesses will see a discount of at least 50%. Apart from the COVID reliefs, this is the biggest single-year tax cut to business rates in over 30 years. Madam Deputy Speaker, taken together, today's budget cuts business rates by £7 billion. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are unleashing the dynamism and creativity of British businesses with a simpler, fairer and more competitive tax system. The biggest business tax cut in modern British history, the biggest single-year tax cut to business rates for 30 years, a £1 million investment allowance, tonnage tax reformed, air passenger duty cut, That is the way to back business and build a stronger economy. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me turn now to alcohol duties. First introduced in 1643 to help pay for the Civil War, our alcohol duty system is outdated, complex, and full of historical anomalies. The Institute of Fiscal Studies have called it, in their words, a mess. The Institute of Economic Affairs said it defies common sense. And the World Health Organization have warned that countries like the UK, which follow the EU rules, are, and I quote, unable to implement tax systems that are optimal from the perspective of public health. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, today we are taking advantage of leaving the EU to announce the most radical simplification of alcohol duties for over 140 years. We are taking 5 steps today to create a system that is simpler, fairer, and healthier. First, to radically simplify the system, we are slashing the number of main duty rates from 15 to just 6. Our new system will be designed around a common sense principle. The stronger the drink, the higher the rate. This means that some drinks, like stronger red wines, fortified wines, or high-strength white ciders, will see a small increase in their rates because they are currently undertaxed given their strength. That's the right thing to do, and it will help end the era of cheap, high-strength drinks which can harm public health and enable problem drinking. And because this is a more rational system, the converse is also true. Many lower alcohol drinks are currently overtaxed and have been for many decades. Rosé, fruit ciders, liqueurs, lower strength beers and wines, today's changes mean that they will pay less. The second step I'm taking today will encourage small, innovative craft producers. I'm announcing proposals for a new small producer relief. This will extend the principle of small brewers relief to include, for the first time ever, small cider makers and other producers making alcoholic drinks of less than 8.5%. Third, I'm going to modernise the system to reflect the way that people drink today. Over the last decade, consumption of sparkling wines, like Prosecco, has doubled. English sparkling wine has increased almost tenfold. It's clear they are no longer the preserve of wealthy elites. And they are no stronger than still wines. So I'm going to end the irrational duty premium of 28% that they currently pay. Sparkling wines, wherever they are produced, will now pay the same duty as still wines of equivalent strength. And because growing conditions in the UK typically favour lower strength and sparkling wines, this means English and Welsh wines, compared with stronger imported wines, will now pay less. Sales of fruit cider have increased from 1 in 1,000 ciders sold in 2005 to 1 in 4 today. But they can pay 2 or 3 times as much duty as cider that is made with apples or pears. So we are cutting the duty on them too. The fourth step I'm taking today will directly support the home of British community life for centuries, our pubs. Even before the pandemic, pubs were struggling. Between 2000 and 2019, consumption in the on-trade fell by 40%. And many public health bodies recognise that pubs are often safer drinking environments than being at home. So, as the members for Dudley South and North West Durham will agree, a fairer, healthier system supports pubs. So I can announce today draft relief. Draft relief will apply a new, lower rate of duty on draft beer and cider. It will apply to drinks served from draft containers over 40 litres. It will particularly benefit community pubs who do 75% of their trade on draft. And let me tell the House the new rate. Draft relief will cut duty by 5%. That is the biggest cut to cider duty since 1923. The biggest cut to fruit ciders in a generation. The biggest cut to beer duty for 50 years. This is not temporary. It's a long-term investment in British pubs of £100 million a year and a permanent cut in the cost of a pint of 3p. And I cannot wait, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the opposition to accuse me tomorrow of beer barrel politics. Madam Deputy Speaker, these much-needed reforms will come into effect in February 2023, but I want to help the hospitality industry right now. So, for my final announcement on alcohol duties today, I can confirm that the planned increase in duty on spirits like Scotch whisky, wine, cider and beer will all, from midnight tonight, be cancelled. That's a tax cut worth £3 billion. Madam Deputy Speaker, our reforms make the alcohol duty system simpler, fairer and healthier. They help with the cost of living while tackling problem drinking. They support innovative entrepreneurs and craft producers. They back pubs and public health. And they are only possible because we've left the European Union. Madam Deputy Speaker, world-class public services, investment in infrastructure, innovation and skills, simpler, fairer taxes to support businesses and consumers, all built on the foundation of a stronger economy and responsible public finances. That is our vision for the future, and that is what this budget delivers. And this budget also supports working families. Madam Deputy Speaker, with fuel prices at the highest level in 8 years, I'm not prepared to add to the squeeze on families and small businesses. So I can confirm today the planned rise in fuel duty will be cancelled. That's a saving over the next 5 years of almost £8 billion. Compared to pre-2010 plans, today's freeze means the average tank of fuel will cost around £15 less per car, £30 less for vans, £130 less for HGVs. After 12 consecutive years of frozen rates, the average car driver will now save a total of £1,900. Madam Deputy Speaker, I can also announce today that public sector workers will see fair and affordable pay rises across the whole spending review period as we return to the normal, independent pay-setting process. And I can take action to help the lowest paid as well. It was a Conservative government that introduced the national living wage in 2016. A Conservative government that, according to statistics published just yesterday, has overseen the proportion of people in low-paid work falling to its lowest level since 1997. And it is a Conservative government that is increasing the wage floor again today. The Independent Low Pay Commission brings together economists, business groups and trades unions. The government is accepting their recommendation to increase the national living wage next year by 6.6% to £9.50 an hour. For a full-time worker, that's a pay rise worth over £1,000. It will benefit over 2 million of the lowest paid workers in the country. It's broadly consistent with previous increases and keeps us on track for our target of 2/3 of median earnings by 2024. And it is a major commitment to the high-wage, high-skill, high-productivity economy of the future. Madam Deputy Speaker, As we build this stronger economy, we're doing so at the end of an extraordinary 18 months. COVID wasn't just a public health challenge. It wasn't just an economic challenge. It was a moral challenge too. We had to show that we could pull together as a country, and we did. We had to put aside questions of ideology and orthodoxy to do whatever it took to care for our people and each other, and we did. There's a different kind of moral dimension to the economic challenge we face now. Last year, the state grew to be over half the size of the total economy. Taxes are rising to their highest level as a percentage of GDP since the 1950s. I don't like it, but I cannot apologise for it. It is the result of the unprecedented crisis we faced and the extraordinary action we took in response. But now we have a choice. Do we want to live in a country where the response to every question is what is the government going to do about it? Where every time prices rise, every time a company gets in trouble, every time some new challenge emerges, the answer is always the taxpayer must pay? Or do we choose to recognise that government has limits? Government should have limits. If this seems a controversial statement to make, then I'm all the more glad for saying it, because that means it needed saying, and it is what we believe. There is a reason we talk about the importance of family, community, and personal responsibility, not because these are an alternative to the market or the state. It's because they are more important than the market or the state. The moments that make life worth living aren't created by government, aren't announced by government, aren't granted by government. They come from us as people, our choices, our sacrifices, our efforts. And we believe people should keep more of the rewards of those efforts. Yes, we've taken some corrective action to fund the NHS and get our debt under control. But as we look towards the future, I want to say this simple thing to the House and the British people. My goal is to reduce taxes. By the end of this Parliament, I want taxes to be going down, not up. I want this to be a society that rewards energy, ingenuity and inventiveness, a society that rewards work. That is what we believe on this side of the House. That is my mission over the remainder of this Parliament. And the final announcement in today's budget takes a first step. Madam Deputy Speaker, for many of the lowest paid in society, there is a hidden tax on work. The universal credit taper withdraws support as people work more hours. The rate is currently 63%, so for every £1 someone earns, their universal credit is reduced by 63p. Let us be in no doubt, this is a tax on work, and a high rate of tax at that. Organisations as varied as the Trades Union Congress, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the Resolution Foundation, the Centre for Policy Studies and the Centre for Social Justice have all said it is too high. So, to make sure work pays and help some of the lowest income families in our country keep more of their hard-earned money, I have decided to cut this rate, not by 1%, not by 2%, but by 8%. This is a tax on working people, and we are cutting it from 63 to 55%. The rate originally envisaged by my right honourable friend, the member for Chingford. And because I'm also increasing the work allowances by £500, this is a tax cut next year worth over £2 billion. Nearly 2 million families will keep, on average, an extra £1,000 a year. Changes like this normally take effect at the start of the new tax year in April. But we want to help people right now. So we will introduce this within weeks and no later than December the 1st. Let me tell the House what these changes mean. A single mother of two, renting and working full-time on the national living wage, will be better off by around £1,200. A couple renting a home with their two children, one working full-time, the other working part-time, will be better off every single year by £1,800. This is a £2 billion tax cut for the lowest paid workers in our country. It supports working families, it helps with the cost of living, and it rewards work. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, fuel duty cut, air passenger duty cut, alcohol duty cut, the biggest cut to business rates in 30 years. Growth up, jobs up, wages up, public finances back in a better place, more investment in infrastructure, innovation and skills, a pay rise for over 2 million people and a £2 billion tax cut for the lowest paid. This budget helps with the cost of living. This budget levels up to a higher wage, higher skill, higher productivity economy. This budget builds a stronger economy for the British people, and I commend it to the House.
So no doubt of a warm reception from the Conservative benches for what sounded like a tax-cutting budget, and which also ended with that massive decision to cut the credit taper by 8% for those on universal credit in work. Now, we're going to hear in a moment from Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, who's had to stand in from Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, because he's tested positive for COVID. But let's just have a quick look at some of the key measures from that statement. The Chancellor announced that the Office for Budget Responsibility has upgraded the growth forecast for 2021 from 4% to 6.5%. He also said that there would be a 50% business rate discount for retail, hospitality and leisure. He promised that the overseas aid target will return to the previous 0.7% of national income by the end of this Parliament, 2024-2025. We can go now to the House of Commons, where we're going to hear shortly the opposition's response to the budget. The
ayes have it. So we now come to the motion entitled Income Tax Charge. It is on this motion that the debate will take place today and on succeeding days. The questions on this motion and on the remaining motions will be put at the end of the budget debate on Tuesday, 2nd of November. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer to move the motion formally.
Sometimes, Beth, budgets are a bit anticlimactic, aren't they? But no doubt that was a fairly major statement from Rishi Sunak.
That was a bigger budget than certainly we were expecting, and I would say it was more a Boris Johnson budget, actually, than a Rishi Sunak budget. And the reason I say that is for all of the Chancellor's discussion around fiscal responsibility and having a smaller state, he actually used some of that largesse from those revised OBR forecasts on the permanent scarring of COVID on the economy. It was revised downwards. It gave him billions more to spend, and there was a lot of spending in that budget. It was a big spending budget. He says he wants to cut taxes at the end of the Parliament, but it definitely leans in to Boris Johnson's approach to the Conservative Party than perhaps the language that Rishi Sunak has been using in recent weeks.
OK, let's go back to the chamber, because we're going to hear now from Rachel Reeves. Big test for her responding to the budget, standing in for Keir Starmer.
With the cost of living crisis, businesses hit by a supply chain crisis, those who rely on our schools and our hospitals and our police. They won't recognise the world that the Chancellor is describing. They will think that he is living in a parallel universe. The Chancellor in this budget has decided to cut taxes for banks. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, at least the bankers on short-haul flights sipping champagne will be cheering this budget today. And the arrogance, after taking £6 billion out of the pockets of some of the poorest people in this country, expecting them to cheer today for £2 billion given to compensate. In the long story of this Parliament, never has a Chancellor asked the British people to pay so much for so little. Time and again today, the Chancellor compared the investments that he is making to the last decade. But who was in charge? Who was in charge in this last decade? They were. So let's just reflect on the choices that Chancellor has made today. The highest sustained tax burden in peacetime. And who is going to pay for it? It's not international giants like Amazon. No, the Chancellor has found a tax deduction for them. It's not property speculators. They've already pocketed a stamp duty cut. And it's clearly not the banks, even though bankers' bonuses are set to reach a record high this year. Instead, the Chancellor is loading the burden on working people. A national insurance tax rise on working people. A council tax hike on working people. And no support today for working people with VAT on their gas and electricity bills. And what are working people getting in return? A record NHS waiting list with no plan to clear it. No way to see a GP and still having to sell their home to pay for social care. Community policing, nowhere to be seen. A court backlog leaving victims without justice. And almost every rape going unprosecuted. A growing gap in results and opportunities between children at private and state schools. Soaring number of pupils in supersized classes. And no serious plan to catch up on learning stolen by the virus. £2 billion announced today, a pale imitation of the £15 billion catch-up fund that the Prime Minister's own education czar said was needed. No wonder, Madam Deputy Speaker, that he resigned. Now, the Chancellor talks about world-class public services. Tell that to a pensioner waiting for a hip operation. Tell that to a young woman waiting to go to court to get justice. Tell that to a mum and dad waiting for their child to get the mental health support that they need. And the Chancellor says today that he's realised what a difference early years spending makes. I would just say to the Chancellor, has he ever heard of the Sure Start programme that this Tory government has cut?
You voted for it.
And why are we in this position? Why are British businesses being stifled by debt while Amazon gets tax deductions? Why are working people being asked to pay more tax and put up with worse services? Why is billions of pounds in taxpayers' money being funnelled to friends and donors of the Conservative Party, while millions of families are having £20 a week taken off of them? Madam Deputy Speaker, why can't Britain do better than this? Now, the government will always blame others. It's businesses' fault. It's the EU's fault. It's the public's fault. They're global problems. The same old excuses. But the blunt reality is this. Working people are being asked to pay more for less for three simple reasons: economic mismanagement, an unfair tax system and wasteful spending. Each of these problems is down to 11 years of Conservative failure. And they shake their heads, but the cuts to our public services have cut them to the bone. And while the Chancellor and Prime Minister like to pretend that they are different, this budget today will only make things worse. The solution starts with growth. The government is caught in a bind of its own making. because low growth inexorably leads to less money for our public services and less taxes rise. And under the Conservatives, Britain has become a low-growth economy. Let's look at the last decade. The Tories have grown the economy at just 1.8% a year. If we had grown at the same rate of other advanced economies, we could have had an additional £30 billion to invest in public services without raising the taxes that the Tories are raising on working people today. And let's compare growth under the last 11 years of Conservative government to the last Labour government. Even taking into account the global financial crisis, Labour grew the economy much faster, by 2.3% a year. If the Tories matched that record, we would have £30 billion more a year to spend on public services. It could not be clearer. The Conservatives are now the party of high taxation because the Conservatives are the party of low growth. And the Office for Budget Responsibility confirmed this today, that we will be back to anaemic growth. They might not like this, but the Office of Budget Responsibility said that by the end of this Parliament, the UK economy will be growing by just 1.3%, which is hardly the plan for growth that the Chancellor boasted about today, hardly a ringing endorsement of his announcements. Under the Tory decade, we have had low growth, and there's not much growth to look forward to. Now, the economy has been weakened by the pandemic, but also by the government's mishandling of it. Responding to the virus has been a huge challenge. Governments around the world have taken on more debt, but our situation is worse than in other countries. Worse because our economy was already fragile going into the crisis. Too much inequality, too much insecure work, too little resilience in our public services. And worse, because the Prime Minister dithered and delayed, against scientific advice, egged on by the Chancellor, we ended up facing harsher and longer restrictions than other countries. So as well as having the highest death toll in Europe, Britain suffered the...
Order. We've got to be able to hear the Honourable Lady. Done. Rachel Reeves.
So as well as having the highest death toll in Europe, Britain has suffered the worst economic hit of any major economy. Now, the Chancellor now boasts that we are growing faster than others. But that's because we fell the furthest. And whilst the US and others have already seen their economy bounce back to levels seen before the pandemic, the UK hasn't. Our economy is set to be permanently weaker. On top of all that, the government is now lurching from crisis to crisis. People avoiding journeys because they can't fill up their petrol tank is not good for the economy. People spending less because the cost of the weekly shop has exploded is not good for the economy. And British exporters facing more barriers than their European competitors because of the deal that this government did is not good for our economy. If this were a plan, it would be economic sabotage. And when the Prime Minister isn't blagging that this chaos is part of his cunning plan, he says that he's not worried about inflation. Well, tell that to families struggling with rising gas and electricity bills, with rising prices of petrol at the pump, and with rising food prices. He's out of touch, he's out of ideas, and he's left working people out of pocket. Madam Deputy Speaker, Conservative mismanagement has made the fiscal situation tight. And when times are tight, it's even more important to ensure that taxes are fair, that taxpayers get value for money, but this government fails on both fronts. We have a grossly unfair tax system, with the burden being heaped on working people. Successive budgets now have raised council tax, have raised income tax, and now they have raised national insurance too. But taxes on those with the broadest shoulders, those who earn their income from stocks and shares and dividends and property portfolios, they've been left barely untouched. Businesses based on the high streets are the lifeblood of our communities. and often the first venture for entrepreneurs. But despite what the Chancellor has said today, businesses will still be held back by punitive and unfair business rates. The government has failed to tax the online giants and watered down global efforts to create a level playing field. And just when we needed every penny of public money to make a difference, we have a government that is a byword for waste, cronyism and vanity projects. We've had £37 billion for a test and trace system that the spending watchdog says treats taxpayers like an ATM cash machine. A yacht for ministers, a fancy paint job for the Prime Minister's plane, and a TV studio for Conservative Party broadcasts, which seems to have morphed into the world's most expensive home cinema. £3.5 billion of government contracts awarded to friends and donors of the Conservative Party. A £190 million loan to a company employing the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff. £30 million to the former Health Secretary's pub landlord. And every single one of those cheques signed by the Chancellor. And now he comes to ordinary working people and asks them to pay more. More than they have been ever asked to pay before. And at the same time, to put up with worse public services, all because of his economic mismanagement, his unfair tax system and his wasteful spending. Now, of course, there are some welcome measures in this budget today, as there are in any budget. Labour welcomes the increase in the national minimum wage, that the government needs to go further and faster. If they had backed Labour's position of an immediate rise to at least £10 an hour, then a full-time worker on the national minimum wage would be in line for an extra £1,000 a year. Ending the punitive public sector pay freeze is welcome, but we know how much this Chancellor likes his smoke and mirrors. So we'll be checking the books to make sure that the money is there for a real terms pay rise. Labour also welcomes the government's decision to reduce the universal credit taper rate, as we have consistently called for. But the system has got so out of whack that even after this reduction, working people on universal credit still face a higher marginal tax rate than the Prime Minister. And those unable to work through no fault of their own still face losing over £1,000 a year. And for families who go out to work every day but don't get government benefits, on an average wage, who have to fill up their car with petrol to get to work, who do that weekly shop, and who see their gas and electricity prices go up, this budget today does absolutely nothing for them. We have a cost of living crisis. The government has no coherent plan to help families cope with rising energy prices. And whilst we welcome the action taken today on universal credit, millions will still struggle to pay the bills this winter. The government has done nothing to help people with their gas and electricity bills with that cut in VAT receipts, as Labour has called for. A cut that is possible because we are outside the European Union and could be funded by the extra VAT receipts that have been experienced in the last few months. Working people are left out in the cold while the government hammers them with tax rises. Now, national insurance is a regressive tax on working people. It is a tax on jobs. Under the Chancellor's plans, a landlord renting out dozens of properties won't pay a penny more in tax. But their tenants, in work, will face tax rises of hundreds of pounds a year. And he is failing to tackle another huge issue of the day: adapting to climate change. Adapting to climate change presents opportunities. More jobs, lower bills and cleaner air. But only if we act now and if we act at scale. According to the Office for Budget Responsibility, failure to act will mean public sector debt explodes later to nearly 300% of GDP. The only way to be a prudent and responsible Chancellor is to be a green Chancellor, to invest in the transition to a zero-carbon economy and give British businesses a head start in the industries of the future. But with no mention of climate in his conference speech and the most passing of references today, We are burdened with a Chancellor unwilling to meet the scale of the challenges we face. Homeowners are left to face the costs of insulation on their own. Industries like steel and hydrogen are in a global race, but without the support that they need. And the Chancellor today has promoted domestic flights over high-speed rail in the week before COP26. And it is because of this, Chancellor, that in this very week that we try and persuade other countries to reduce their emissions, this government can't even confirm that it will meet its 2035 climate reduction target. Madam Deputy Speaker, everywhere working people look at the moment, they see prices going up and they see shortages on the shelves. But this budget did nothing to address their fears. Household budgets are being stretched thinner than ever. But this budget did nothing to deal with the spiralling cost of living. It is a shocking missed opportunity by a government that is completely out of touch. There is an alternative. Rather than just tweak the system, Labour would scrap business rates and replace it with something much better by ensuring online giants pay their fair share. That's what being pro-business looks like. We wouldn't put up national insurance for working people. We would ensure that those with the broadest shoulders pay their fair share. That's what being on the side of working people looks like. We'd end the £1.7 billion subsidy that the government gives to private schools and put it straight into our local state schools. That's what being on the side of working families looks like. And we deliver a climate investment pledge, £28 billion every year for the rest of this decade. That's gigafactories to build batteries for electric vehicles. That's a thriving hydrogen industry, creating jobs in all parts of our country, and retrofitting so that we keep homes warm and get our energy bills down. That's what real action on climate change looks like. This country deserves better, but they'll never get it under this Chancellor, who gives with one hand but takes so much more with the other. The truth is this. What you get with these two is a classic con game. It's like one of those pickpocketing operations that you see in crowded places. The Prime Minister is the front man, distracting people with his wild promises. All the while, the Chancellor dips his hand in their pockets. It all seems like fun and games until you walk away and find that your purse has been lifted. But people are getting wise to them. Every month they feel the pinch. They're tired of the smoke and mirrors. They're tired of the bluster, of the false dawns, of the promises of jam tomorrow. Labour would put working people first, would use the power of government and the skill of business to ensure that the next generation of quality jobs are created right here in Britain. We'd tax fairly, spend wisely, and after a decade of faltering growth, we'd get the Britain's economy firing on all cylinders. That is what a Labour budget would have done today.
Well, big cheers there from the Labour benches to that speech from the substitute answering to that budget, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, who stood in for Sir Keir Starmer, and certainly a strong attack there on the government. She pointed out that Rishi Sunak was constantly saying how he'd improved things or taken them back to what they were like in the last decade. She said, well, who was in charge in the last decade? The answer is the Conservatives. She said that the wrong people were being asked to pay more for less, repeatedly contrasting what she said were tax cuts for the likes of Amazon against the increases in national insurance and things such as VAT on rising gas bills. So that really is where things stand as far as this budget is concerned. Strong support from each of the benches for the submissions made by the Chancellor and the Shadow Chancellor there. Well, good afternoon. As you've seen, the Chancellor has unveiled his budget, promising an economy fit for the new age of optimism. Rishi Sunak said economic growth would recover better than had been previously forecast after the COVID pandemic, but he warned of rising inflation in the months ahead. Let's take a look now at some of the main measures announced by the Chancellor. There was good news for the hospitality industry. A planned increase of alcohol duty has been cancelled, along with a 5% duty cut on draft beer and cider. The planned increase in fuel duty has also been cancelled, and flights between airports in the United Kingdom, between England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, will be subject to a new lower rate of air passenger duty from April next year. The Chancellor said there would be a 50% business rates discount for a year for retail, hospitality and leisure. He promised that the overseas aid target would return to the previous 0.7% of national income by the end of this Parliament, 2024-25. And he announced £5 billion towards the removal of dangerous cladding on buildings. There was confirmation of some of the big announcements which had been made in the run-up to the budget. The end of the year-long pay freeze for public sector workers, a rise in the national minimum wage to £9.50 from April, up more than 6% for those aged over 23, and a further £5.9 billion in capital funding to help the National Health Service clear the backlog created by COVID-19.
Madam Deputy Speaker, fuel duty cut, air passenger duty cut, alcohol duty cut, the biggest cut to business rates in 30 years. Growth up, jobs up, wages up, public finances back in a better place, more investment in infrastructure, innovation and skills, a pay rise for over 2 million people and a £2 billion tax cut for the lowest paid. This budget helps with the cost of living. This budget levels up to a higher wage, higher skill, higher productivity economy. This budget builds a stronger economy for the British people, and I commend it to the House.
Well, the Leader of the Opposition, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, was absent from the Commons because he tested positive for COVID just minutes before Prime Minister's questions. In his place, the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves told MPs that the budget was asking working people to pay less for more, and she accused the Chancellor of living in a parallel universe.
Never has a Chancellor asked the British people to pay so much for so little. Time and again today, the Chancellor compared the investments that he is making to the last decade. But who was in charge? Who was in charge in this last decade? They were. So let's just reflect on the choices that Chancellor has made today. The highest sustained tax burden in peacetime. And who is going to pay for it? It's not international giants like Amazon. No, the Chancellor has found a tax deduction for them. It's not property speculators. They've already pocketed a stamp duty cut. And it's clearly not the banks, even though bankers' bonuses are set to reach a record high this year. Instead, the Chancellor is loading the burden on working people.
Well, here with me in Westminster covering the budget is our political editor, Beth Rigby. And Beth, some truth in Rachel Reeves' repeated claim that what the Chancellor was doing in some ways was taking the pattern of spending back to what it was in the last Labour government in 2010.
Yeah, it is true, but let's have a quick look at the macroeconomics. I know Ed will talk more about it, and then how that drills down. I mean, what you had there was the economy is recovering faster than expected. The long-term economic scarring from the COVID pandemic is less severe than the Office of Budget Responsibility thought just a few months ago. So the economy will be 2% smaller by the middle of the decade, not 3% smaller. That does give the Chancellor, 20 to 30 billion more in money to pay for that all. Now, when you get to the policy of this all, there has been talked about this tension between Rishi Sunak, who's wanted to be fiscally conservative, low tax, careful on spending, and then the big spender, Boris Johnson. I think that budget showed who'd won out, and it was certainly, I think, framed as a Boris Johnson budget, or that's how I saw it. I think that's how economists and observers will see it. But yeah, if you go back to what you just said about Labour governments, this is what Paul Johnson from the Institute of Fiscal Studies said. He said the 150 billion increase in departmental spending over the Parliament, that's a 3.8% real increase. He said these are big spending increases, much more in common with Brown and Blair than Osborne and Cameron. So if you wanted confirmation that Boris Johnson is taking Blair's clothes, then look no further than this budget. He's signalled his intent. Do you remember when he announced the big tax increase on national insurance? He said we are the party of the NHS when he did that. Now, so there's bigger spending than we expected. We'd expected that the Chancellor would put more away perhaps for a rainy day, because he himself said that inflation is a concern. It could run up to 4%. What if there's another spike in COVID cases? But is it too good to be true almost? And I think that's where Rachel Reeves came in there, because from a Labour's perspective, what they're arguing is when you look into the figures, and we're just looking through them now, there's lots of tax increases here for people. VAT is going to go up 4 billion and then 9.3 billion per year for the next 2 years. Council tax, if you look at the Office for Budget Responsibility, it's going to go up to 12.1 billion, up 33% from now by 2026-7. So I think when we drill into the numbers, Rishi Sunak talked a lot about the big giveaways and a lot about the spending and a lot about the cuts around alcohol duty, fuel duty. But in it, are there more tax rises for people? Because I think the acid test of this budget isn't the optics in the chamber, but in 5-6 months' time, are people struggling with inflation really feeling the squeeze of the cost of living, or are their lives improving under this government?
And have we managed to work out that key figure, whether more is being taken than is being spent, or the other way around?
In terms of the tax take?
Yeah.
Well, it looks like that there's a I don't know yet, actually. I haven't worked that out yet. I haven't looked through the Red Book. But when you look into the figures, this is what I was making the point on in terms of council tax and VAT. There will be much more hidden tax take than perhaps was presented by the Chancellor there.
And politically, Boris Johnson there wearing his COP26 Blue Planet badge, but Labour making a great deal, both at Prime Minister's questions and in their reply to the budget, over what's been done on climate change issues.
Well, exactly in that budget. I mean, the Prime Minister announced a cut in fuel duty, and he announced a freezing of air passenger duty, and a freezing of fuel duty. It hardly speaks to a greener agenda. So there's a lot of talk about being greener, but then in some of the policy decisions being taken, it's not reflected in actually the black and white ink of the Treasury.
Well, let's get more analysis now of the hard facts and figures from our economic and data editor, Ed Conway. Ed.
Thanks, Adam. Actually, you were asking a moment ago about that question about what is, is this a giveaway? Is it taking money away? Well, so we've got these numbers. There's a lot of figures here we're looking through at the moment. But take everything as a whole, and that includes, obviously, what we had with the national insurance decision earlier on this year. It includes all of that money about health. It includes things like the triple lock. So changing it from a triple lock to a double lock, that actually kind of technically brings in a lot of money. It may not be new today, but it goes in the numbers that we've got today. When you put it all together, it does look like it represents money leaving the Treasury, so a giveaway. But as for just, when we adjust for things, we will get you that data over the course of the next few hours. And let me just show you what we have for the time being. I'm going to put one iPad down and pick up one other, because I want to show you growth, and I want to show you what happened to borrowing as well. We got new growth numbers from the Office for Budget Responsibility. This is the big picture, really. This is, how well is the economy doing, and whether these bars are kind of above the line or below the line, that shows the economy is growing, and I think above the line, that shows the economy is shrinking, and obviously you'll see that's what happened during the pandemic, an enormous fall. These are the last figures, I should say. So the last time the OBR looked at these numbers earlier on this year, this is how these bars look. Well, let me update them with the latest numbers we've just had through today. And you can see there is a change, isn't there? Just look, this year, I was saying earlier, we need to have a look at this particular year, so 2021, and what happened to this bar? Did it go up? And yes, it has gone up from 4% to 6.5%. So a very big upgrade there. That is a big upgrade and one of the strongest years that we've seen for economic growth basically in the last few decades. However, then you've got a bit of a cut in the 2022. Basically, the bounces has a different profile, doesn't it? When you're looking at what's happening to the economy, it's got a slightly different profile, slightly stronger this year, slightly weaker the next year. And then have a look through here. We go into the future. So we're moving through to 25, 26. And here's the other thing that's striking, OK? These numbers, 1.6%, that is not really punchy long-term economic growth. We're talking about, you know, below what used to be considered trend growth of about 2.5%. So is that a bit of a disappointment? Perhaps. Economists will look at that and say, well, if you're hoping for a big productivity-busting budget, putting money into levelling up and hoping for, you know, an improvement in our long-term growth potential, well, that's not all that encouraging at 1.6%. That's the official forecast from the OBR just now. And let's have a look to borrowing. So, obviously, if you've got stronger growth, that means potentially more tax revenues coming in and the economy doing a little bit better as a result. And certainly the public finances really needed something like that. This shows you borrowing last time around. So again, the forecast from the OBR last time around, very big borrowing during the pandemic. Obviously, this is the year that we're in at the moment. Let's see how those have changed. Can we add the new figures on? So these are the latest figures from the OBR, which have cut the borrowing forecast in this year, in the next year, in the year after that, in the year after that, all the way through over into the end of the forecast horizon, where you're talking about really quite low levels of borrowing, 46 billion, 44 billion. That's really small by the comparisons of recent years, you know, by both the pandemic and the post-financial crisis years. And obviously comes back to that point that Rishi Sunak wanted to make, that it is about fiscal responsibility. You know, you don't have massive giveaways towards the end of the forecast horizon, raising a question, you know, and this is a political question which both of you will be more qualified to talk about than I will, but at this point, does the Chancellor then have more leeway, even within his self-imposed fiscal rules, to start doing tax cuts or indeed giveaways before a potential election in either of those 2 years? It looks like, but, you know, this is a budget which could gear you up for some giveaways in the future, because it wasn't enormous when it came to those giveaways. That's what we've got for the time being, Adam. We'll bring you more of this data, including that kind of breakdown of where the money is being spent, how much of it is going into people's pockets, how much of it is coming in over the course of the next few hours.
Thank you very much indeed, Ed Conway. Well, the Chancellor repeatedly said that this was a good budget for business. Let's get some reaction now from that world of business. Over to our business correspondent, Helen Ann Smith, who joins us from Swindon. Helen Ann.
Yes, that's right, Adam. I think there was really a sense from the Chancellor that he would have wanted businesses to come away from today with a sense that there was something for them to help them through the winter as it comes. Remember, the context, a really tough time for businesses. Hikes in national insurance, hikes in corporation tax, a raise in that national minimum wage, all at the time where they're dealing with inflation, supply chain problems, the labour crisis. A difficult time for business. I think a real sense he wanted to show some support. And that support certainly came, particularly, most notably, with a 50% cut in business rates just for this year, up to a cap of £110,000. That will make a big difference, particularly to high street businesses, to retail businesses who have had a difficult time for sure. And I'm in one of them now. I'm in Swindon Town Centre in Something Different gift shop. I'm joined by one of the co-owners, Ross Mulholland. Ross, thank you so much for being with us. So, firstly, before this was the statement was given, you said that business rates was something you would really like to see. What's your response today?
I'm really happy with that. Really positive. That has been a sticking point for us for a long time, especially compared to, say, the estimated rental value of our units. It's actually quite high. I've long since maintained that the thing that got us through the lockdowns, the multiple lockdowns last year, was actually cash flow. So even though this is a temporary measure to get us through, I'm actually really happy to see it, because it just means we can recapitalise, reinvest and just keep the wheels turning until we actually get through to brighter futures.
Because I guess things are still tough for small businesses like yours, aren't they? I know the pandemic was a particularly difficult time. Footfall has recovered to a degree, but things still on slightly shaky form. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, wobbly. Probably mostly supply chain at the moment. Footfall is feeling quite good at the moment. I definitely think we've had quite a considerable bounce back, especially in Swindon, from the lockdowns to now, seeing lots of people, lots of old faces and new, which is great. I am struggling to get stock from Europe, from the UK, from everyone. Even our suppliers who manufacture in the UK are struggling to get their raw materials from Europe. So there are times when the supply chain for us just kind of grounds to a halt, and all we can do is sit here and wait, really. I'm currently holding more stock than I've ever held before, just on the off chance I can't get anything.
And is that potentially all pushing through to you having to put your prices up for your customers?
We really don't like doing that, and I don't want to. We've been able to sit on the same prices for a long, long time. Really good supplier relations and various other little bits of, movements behind the scenes for us. I think the inevitability is in the new year we're going to have to visit some prices that haven't changed for a long time. There's only so many price changes we can swallow from our suppliers before we have to react. Not this side of Christmas, though.
Thank you, Ross. Really appreciate your time today. Worth saying as well, there was cuts to alcohol duty for some draft beers and other things as well. Another nod, I think, from the Treasury to those industries that were hardest hit by the pandemic and could potentially also be hard hit again if, as we head into winter, COVID rears its ugly head again and there needs to be more restrictions. A sense particularly for leisure, retail, hospitality, that the Chancellor wanted to give them something to be optimistic about today.
Thank you very much indeed, Helena.
Welcome back to the Peace Hall in Halifax, West Yorkshire. The Chancellor laying out his budget within the last hour, talking about an age of optimism post-COVID. However, Labour have accused Rishi Sunak of living in a parallel universe in the face of rising cost of living demands. Well, with me now is our political correspondent, Kate McCann. Kate, it was wide-ranging, it was high spending, it was bigger in every way than we expected. And we were just talking there a few minutes ago, and I said, do you think you'll be able to sum it up for a couple of minutes for us? And you said you'd have panic in your eyes if I asked you that. But I'm going to set you the challenge. There was so much in it, wasn't there? What were your takeaways?
Yeah, it's one of those where the more information you take on, the harder it is to really try and work out what's actually happened. We're starting to get some reaction from business. So CBI says, although this won't transform the economy necessarily, like the Chancellor says he hopes it will, they do broadly welcome it. And you're right, it was bigger than we expected. Departmental spending, for example, that's gone up to incredibly high levels. Now, the Treasury, the Chancellor, is saying 3.8% increase. The IFS is saying in their snap analysis, actually it's 3%. But regardless of which one it is a huge increase in departmental spending. And we saw lots of smaller things, £2 billion more for school catch-ups, £3.8 billion for prisons, £4.8 billion for councils on social care. So the money is being spent. Lots of it is capital investment. And clearly Rishi Sunak also very focused on making sure that he sticks to those fiscal rules, which ultimately will allow him to get back to 0.7% spending on aid, for example, but not until 2024. So it was very much a budget all about balance. But I think there will be some questions. The universal credit uplift, we were talking about it before we actually heard from Rishi Sunak, and we were talking about how it might go from 63 pence to 60 pence. Well, he shocked everybody, including one of your guests who was before saying 55% would be what they would want to see. It is 55 pence. So that is more than we thought the Chancellor was going to do. It will make a difference to some working families, but important to say, not everybody, around 2 million who are working, who are on the work allowance. That's not everyone on universal credit. It won't compensate for that £20 a week uplift, which has been removed for everyone. So Labour saying it doesn't go far enough. But I think the signals broadly, and it is very, very early days, is that this is a Chancellor who is keen to steal some of that ground from Labour, more than we've even seen the party do already, to invest in public services, to hope that skills investment will increase productivity and overall help the country ride out that potential for inflation rising. Important to say the forecast on inflation done before the increase in energy prices said 4%. That could potentially go as high as 5%. Now, that would put a real squeeze on what the Chancellor has announced today. So it's important to wait for a couple of months to see how all this settles. But certainly a welcome from lots of people. Big questions, though. Where was the green stuff? Where was all the stuff about investment in green technology? Yes, there's a lot of research and development investment, although, again, delayed by 2 years. Businesses will be disappointed to hear that. But, cutting APD, air passenger duty, yes, it's great for domestic flights, but at the end of the day, that coupled with the fuel duty freeze means that there will be people saying we're going into COP looking like we're not doing as much as we possibly could have been doing on the green investment. So there are some questions, I think, for the Chancellor, but we are still digesting it all, as you say.
Yeah, in the coming hours and days, keep it Sky News for all the analysis of the budget as we go through all those facts and figures delivered by the Chancellor to find out the truth of what's been announced this afternoon. Kate, thank you. I'm going to come back to you in a minute because I want to talk about the pre-budget drama involving Labour as Keir Starmer testing positive. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but we're going to go live to Central Lobby now inside the Houses of Parliament and our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Hi, Sam.
Hello, good afternoon. So, what a budget that was. Much bigger than many anticipated. Spending on public services up, spending on welfare up. It looked to many as if it was, as Kate was just saying, a raid into Labour terrain. So what does Labour make of it? I'm joined by Peter Kyle. Now, he's the MP for Hove. He's also Labour's Shadow Schools Minister, and he joins me now. Peter, some would say that the Tories, in a funny way, on the benches in the Commons just there in the chamber, were a bit more muted than normal. But that's because a lot of the policies that the Chancellor's just announced would appeal more to your voters, wouldn't it?
In the previous budgets I've sat in, when it was Phil Hammond and when it was George Osborne, you couldn't hear yourself thinking there because the Tories are cheering so loudly. Here it was muted, but not muted because they didn't like some of the policies that were announced. It was muted because the overall budget didn't match the scale of the challenge the British economy faces at the moment. Just look at the one glaring fact that's emerged just in the last hour. That's that inflation stands at 4%, but growth is going to be about 1.3%. There is a huge chasm between what people are going to be earning and the money and the value of the money that people can spend. None of the measures individually will tackle that, either for businesses and particularly for people who are in work and on low incomes at the moment.
So I suppose the question is, first of all, in that budget, which did have a raft of measures, many of which would be, I suspect, supported by people like you because they're spending on things that you think are needed. What do you oppose? What measure would you vote against that Rishi Sunak has just announced?
There are certain measures in there that I would, but they're very limited and very specific and very targeted. The problem that we've got at the moment is he's not repurposing the economy for the 2020s.
So I want to stop you. I want to ask, which would you oppose and therefore which would you let get through?
What I'm saying is that at the moment this is a budget that reflects the priorities of Tory party donors and where their wealth comes from. It does not reflect where the wealth in the general economy comes from. That's the problem. We are taxing more and more and more people who are on high streets, small businesses who are trading face-to-face with people. We're taxing less and less those businesses that have shifted online. That means our economy is susceptible to global companies that are coming in and making a lot of money out of our economy, and it's punishing those who are hard-working up and down our country in high streets.
So in a budget which saw Rishi Sunak play to Labour voters, the question for Labour will be, what do you oppose? I think we're going to be waiting for an answer for a while.
Sam Coates in the lobby, thank you very much. Plenty of reaction to what we've heard from the Chancellor throughout the day here on Sky News. We're still digesting the big announcements and the figures. We'll bring you all the analysis throughout the day. A big focus on levelling up and funding for the whole of the UK in that speech today. Rishi Sunak announcing what he called the largest block grants for devolved nations since devolution. He also allocated the first round of bids from the Levelling Up Fund and listed some of those areas.
We are backing projects in Aberdeen, Bury, Burnley, Lewes, Clwyd South, and not one, not two, but three successful projects for the great city of Stoke-on-Trent. But that's not all. We're also going to fund projects in Ashton-under-Lyne, South Leicester, Sunderland, Doncaster and West Leeds. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are so committed to levelling up, we are even levelling up the opposition front bench.
Well, let's see what business people here in West Yorkshire are making of what they heard from the Chancellor this afternoon. I'm joined now by Martin Hathaway, Managing Director of the Mid-Yorkshire Chamber of Commerce, and alongside him, Nikki Chance-Thompson, CEO and Trustee of the Peace Hall, which is hosting us here in Halifax today. Hello to you both. Hello. We are still digesting the budget. It was so wide-ranging. There was such a lot in it. So there's still a lot more to come out. But let's just talk about what we know so far. And Martin, going into this budget, what do you want? And early indicators from what you heard, do you think you got any of it?
I think we got some of it. We got a review of the business rate system undertaken, and there's definitely things there that will help business, in particular smaller businesses, but we did want a more fundamental review. I think it was very interesting to hear what a positive view the Chancellor has of how businesses are doing at the moment, and that is true of Halifax businesses. Halifax businesses have been very resilient throughout this. Just slightly concerned he didn't address all of the issues that are coming around the corner, the inflationary pressures that are going to be caused by the increase of costs of staff, of transport and of power.
Yeah, he talked about inflation, saying it could go up to 4%, but since he said that, the IFS have come out and said actually could be more like 5%. Nikki, Martin was just talking there about businesses in West Yorkshire and how resilient they've been. We can see that today, a bit of half-term trade here in the Peace Hall, lots of families about going inside all the small businesses here. I may have spent a few pounds myself half an hour or so ago. But talk to me about what it's been like and what these businesses need from the government over the next 3 years, because we're still in uncertain times. Do you think the Chancellor delivered to provide that optimism he talked about?
I think he did. I mean, the commitment towards culture and heritage high streets, I think, is really positive. The Peace Hall has helped transform Calderdale over the last 4 years since it reopened, generating GVA of 26 million. So it just demonstrates what culture and heritage can do. I think I would have liked to have seen something around VAT being frozen for longer. Although we have traded OK and reasonably, the retail sector is still a little bit sluggish. Hospitality has picked up tremendously because naturally people have wanted to meet up with each other, see family and friends. But I think that the VAT freeze could have helped alongside the business rate relief slash to 50%. Again, that's tremendously helpful, and there is recognition that we're not out of the woods yet. There is optimism and hope here at the Peace Hall that we will continue to recover. But I think my advice to Rishi is, don't go too fast with taxation. We're still emerging from the pandemic. We're not quite out of the operating theatre yet. There's still a long way to go.
Yeah, VAT, of course, set to go up in April. Let's talk about the business rates announcement. He wanted to create a fairer and timelier business rate system. From 2023, it's going to be re-evaluated frequently. Amongst the announcements, he said there's going to be a 50% discount for business rates for retail, hospitality and leisure for a year. And he also talked about an introduction of new business rate improvement relief, things for things like hotel improvements if a factory wants to extend. What did you make of that?
I think you should have gone much further. The 50% discount for the next year is really welcome and will make a huge difference to our high streets and our businesses everywhere in the sectors that can benefit from it. But the rate system has been unsuitable as a method of taxing businesses for a very long time. Taxing on property doesn't happen elsewhere, and we at the Chambers of Commerce have been saying that should be reflected elsewhere in the corporation tax system. However, what he has announced will help. It's always been slightly odd that if you spend money on renovating your business that you rent on the property that you're in, that your rates bill will go up, so your costs go up on top of that, and that's been recognised and that will be appreciated by businesses.
Something that wasn't mentioned, it was mentioned slightly, is HS2 and the vague reference to, the rail networks across the country, and that's part of levelling up. Martin, would you have liked to have heard more of that? Obviously, he's committed a lot of money to transport, but do you feel a bit fobbed off?
Yes, it was top of my list was to get the announcement for the east side, and it may or may not come later. We've been told this a lot, so I would have liked to have seen an announcement about HS2 and more specifics around how we're going to level up the north and use the transport system to do that. One of the biggest issues that our members tell us they have is transport across the north, is getting across the north, getting from Liverpool and getting to Hull. And until we do something about that system and get some recognition from it, we're a long way off being able to be levelled up. I'd have also liked to have seen more on what levelling up means. I'm not sure I know as yet, so how...
Yeah, Nikki, are you any clearer about levelling up for places like Halifax after that budget?
I'm not sure I'm clear on what the plan is, but the Peace Hall is actually a really good practical example of where levelling up can work. So for a £19 million investment, with a £26 million GVA return on investment. The town is transforming. You can see that the impact of that is considerable. But simply, if we want these great assets to work, cultural destinations to work, tourism destinations to work, we need good infrastructure and we need good transport. And at the moment, Halifax and most of the north is underserved by regular and sufficient public transport. So for me, it's them really setting out the plan more clearly so that we understand what's coming, so that we can react to that and respond to that.
Yeah, we did talk to the Mayor for West Yorkshire, Tracy Braben, earlier here on Sky News, and she was talking about local transport wanting investment. The Chancellor did announce £5 billion for local roads, £5 billion for buses and cycling networks, and 50 local road upgrades. But as you said, it's that bigger investment that you were looking out for today that the Chancellor said is going to be safe for another day. We didn't even get time to get onto alcohol tax, which is the Peace Hall. It's such a vibrant centre for people to come and mix. It's a hot topic, but we will talk about that later. Thank you so much for joining us. Really good to see you. Kate McCann, our political correspondent, has dubbed it the Prosecco budget. I wonder if Adam can do any better. You're watching a Sky News budget live from Westminster.
Well, not just Prosecco, Sarah Jane, but also champagne. But on the other hand, red wine, sherry, they're going to be more expensive now. So depends what your tipple is, really. Well, coming up, you're watching Sky News Budget Special, and we're going to get more reaction from the chair.